I'll tell you what, hey, we are in our second week of this series called Table of Context. Bring it in, bring it in, bring it in. Awesome. Hey, so over the next few weeks, here's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at what does it mean to be a Christian. Now, I don't know if you believe in God, I don't know if you follow God or where you're at with that, but over the next few weeks, we're going to look at, hey, what do you have to believe? What do you have to do? Maybe how do you have to hold yourself? Like, what does it look like to live a life of being a Christian? Now, let's be honest. This is really confusing for us, isn't it? Like, it is sometimes really confusing what it means to be a Christian, to know what to do, to what to believe. And maybe even for some of us, it's really difficult and confusing for us to know who to trust because of the reputation that maybe the experience that we've had in church. And last week we kicked off this series and we talked about this idea of over generations upon generations, what happens is sometimes there's these thoughts and there's ideas that take non-essential things, and what we do is we elevate them over essential things, and then what happens is something that's helpful becomes hurtful. And what ends up happening is that's how you get church hurt, and that's how you get things where maybe you probably all have been here before where you've seen somebody like this, right? Where they talk about Jesus, they say they believe in Jesus, but if we're being real, and this might sound harsh, but they don't really look like Jesus or act like Jesus. Matter of fact, they're probably the furthest thing from it. And so last week we asked this question. We made this statement of what do you think about when you believe in God? Because whatever that is, that's the most important thing about you. And so we're going to be unpacking that a little bit more tonight. And regardless of what you believe, though, wherever you're at, I just want you to know this. Hey, we are just glad that you're here. If you don't believe in Jesus, hey, we are just glad that you're with us, that you're taking the courage. It is brave, if you don't believe in God, to step foot into a place where you don't know anything about God, or maybe you've had church hurt, and to give it a shot. And so it means a lot to us, and we don't take that for granted. So we are glad that you're here. And those of us that do believe in God, man, my hope for us over this next few weeks is that we would continue to grow in our faith. Now, here's not the goal of this series. I want to make this clear. I said this last week. The goal of this series is not to convert you. It's not to convince you. It's just to help all of us, wherever we're at, whether we believe in God or not, to take that next step. And so if you don't believe in God, here's my challenge for you. What would it look like if that step for you tonight was just that you were curious? Hey, what if this is real? I'm not saying, hey, you got to convert or you have to believe right now, but what would it look like if that step for you tonight was just, what if this Jesus thing, this Christian thing was legit? Not what I was talked about or taught or that I've seen, but it was actually legit. And those of us that do believe in God, what would it look like if we continued to grow in that relationship? And so here's what I want to do. I want to kick off tonight by just sharing a story, all right? Now, this story is pretty ridiculous, so everybody get ready. You guys ready? That was not convincing. Are you ready? All right. So, I love this story, but there's a story of this guy, all right, this guy and this girl, and they decide to get married. They're from different towns. And what happens in this story is they're at this wedding, and they decide, like, you know what? Hey, we're going to get all families together. We're going to all of our friends together. And at this wedding, the groom is talking to these guys that are from the bride's town, all right? And as he's talking to them, they end up having this conversation, and it's kind of weird, but he shares a riddle, and he makes a bet with them. He says, you can't solve this riddle. I bet you can't do it. So they make this bet, but then what these guys do, these dudes from the bride's town, is they go up to the bride and they say, here's what you need to do. Your future husband told us this riddle. We're trying to figure it out because we're super competitive. And so what we need you to do is we need you to go to him to get the answer and to bring it back to us. And if you don't, we're going to kill you and your family. That's a little extreme, right? Like, whoa, that took a turn. That escalated quickly. And so she starts freaking out. So she goes to the groom. She's like, hey, what's the answer to the riddle? She brings it back to these guys. She tells them they win the bet because they just got done solving this riddle. And the groom is so upset that he loses his temper and he kills a bunch of people. And then he leaves the town. Once again, what? Like, this is a little extreme, right? And then the bride's dad, this story just gets worse and worse. The bride's dad says, well, this is the worst wedding ever. People died, right? And he's like, well, he left though. He was toxic. He was bad. You know, that's awful. So it looks like my daughter's single again. So we're going to remarry her. All right. So she gets remarried. Then the groom shows back up like later on in life, and he goes, yo, where my wife at, right? And he's like, your wife is married. And he's like, no, she ain't. And they have this argument, and he's like, you could marry her sister. She's more attractive anyways. And it's like this weird, yeah. It's like, what's going on? What is going on? And so this dude loses it. The groom loses it. So what he does is he goes hunting, all right? He captures a bunch of foxes. This is a true story. He lights their tails on fire. Talk about animal cruelty, right? The foxes run around with their tails on fire, and they burn down all of the dad's crops. All right? Rude. Like, this is a crazy story, right? Like, anybody think this is a crazy story? Like, you've heard this before? So, this story is in the Bible. It's legit. It's a story that's in the Bible. If you don't believe me, it is Judges chapters 14 through 15. Go check it out. Now, obviously, it doesn't read the way, like he didn't say, like, yo, is she married? That's not what it's going to say, all right? That was my translation of it. But go check it out. But maybe you're like me, right? So maybe for some of us, we've been in church. We've grown up in church, maybe for some of us. Maybe for some of us, we've not grown up in church. We just heard about it. But if we're being honest, if you're like me, you hear this story and you go, what does that have to do for my life? That's just weird, right? And for some of us, we think that. If you're like me, man, I grew up, so those of you guys that know my story, I talked about it a little bit last week, but you guys know that big part of my story is there was a point in my life where I said, I'm done with this church stuff. Like, I am done with it. I don't want any of this. Like, I'm good. It's too weird. It's too judgmental. I don't understand it. I'm confused. I feel judged. And last week, I posed this question of, if we're not careful, you might end up doing something that I did, where you get so confused, so hurt, all these different things, where you throw baby Jesus out with the bathwater, right? You get rid of everything. You're like, I don't want any of this. And then what you end up doing in the process, like I did, is you actually risk also giving up things that might be good for you, that might be needed for you. And then you have to go on a long journey like I did, where you have to then go step by step by getting healing to find who Jesus really is. And so, where are you at tonight? Where are you at tonight? Where are you at with this whole God thing, this whole Christian thing, this whole church thing? And what are these parts of the Bible and Christianity that seem so unbelievable to us, that seem so, if we're being honest, it's okay to be real about it, sometimes ridiculous. We're like, I don't understand what this says. What do these things have to do for us? How do we process these things? How do we navigate these things? Maybe for some of us, we're sitting here like, man, how do I understand these stories that go against what I learned in school in science class? Because, you know, these stories have giant fish and miracles and loaves of fish that get multiplied. Like, that doesn't happen. That doesn't make sense. Like, I don't even know where to go. Maybe for some of us, we find parts of the Bible and Christianity outdated. Maybe we find it offensive. Maybe sets of rules seem silly to us, like don't wear cotton, don't eat pork. We read that and we go, what do I do with this? Like, I love bacon. Like, we're like, I don't even know what to do, right? Or the parts just seem unjust or cruel. Here's the thing. Confusion, doubt, and feelings of being even bothered are okay. It's okay. Matter of fact, that's good that you feel that, because you're thinking about it. You're thinking about it. It's good that you're processing. That's actually really mature, that we're not just sitting and going, you know what, tell me what this is and I'll believe it. But we go, hey, hold up. I have questions about this. But here's the thing. In church, like we talked about last week, my experience was that was not okay. But we want you guys to know that as you walk into this place, it's okay to have those questions. It's okay to have those feelings. It's okay to be like, hey, man, I read this in the Bible, Tanner, and like, it bothered me. Can we talk about it? That's okay. But it's not okay to hold it all in. It's not okay to not talk about it, to not have those questions. And so, what if sometimes the reason that we feel disconnected from the Bible, or if the reasons that we feel disconnected from Jesus and from church, from this whole Christian thing, is because we were told about the Bible and Christianity, but we actually haven't had a chance to experience it and live it. That people have told us what to believe, but what if it looks different when we actually try to experience it. We take that chance, we take that step saying, Jesus, you know what? I don't understand this, but I need you. I need you. And so I'm going to worship you until I do understand this. What would it look like if we took that chance? What if we can't see the importance because what we think of when we think of God are negative things? Remember that question last week? What do you think of God? Because whatever that is the most important thing about you. Here's why. That's your starting point for your next step. So maybe for some of us, what we think of is hurt, pain, rejection, judgment. Maybe that next step is we need to get healing on those things. Maybe for some of us, our place when we think of God is, man, he's my savior. He's everything. Well, then maybe your next step, that starting place for you is how can you bring that to other people? That's great that you have that relationship, but how can you bring that to other people? This thing can be confusing. The Bible can be confusing, and we're not going to answer all of your questions over the next few weeks. Matter of fact, you're probably going to have a lot of unanswered questions, and that's okay as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to try and tackle some of this tonight. And one of the things we're going to tackle is this word called context. Everybody say context. Now, we're not going to be able to talk about all of the odd, unbelievable, or even maybe for you, depending on where you're at, troubling parts of the Bible. But the good news is that we're going to be able to look at context, which I think is going to help us understand things over the next few weeks a little bit better. All right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about the Bible. Is that cool? I'm going to nerd out for a little bit. It might get a little informational, so stay with me. If you fall asleep, we're going to have somebody dunk, and it's going to be a really weird way to wake up. So don't do that, all right? That's not why that's there. You're like, really? That's all that's for? We'll get to that in a second. But in the Bible, we got two different things, right? We got the Old Testament and we got the New Testament. The Old Testament, if you don't know, is the beginning of the story of God's relationship with God's people. That's the simplest way that I can say that. It's God's relationship with God's people. The New Testament is the story, that same story, continued through the life of Jesus, through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus in the beginning of the church, of us, of what this looks like, right? There's 66 books total in the Bible, so that's a lot. Some of us, maybe we knew that, but maybe for some of us, we went, what? It's just one book, right? 66 books? What is that? And when I think about that, no wonder it's confusing, right? No wonder when we have 66 books that are in one cover as one book, that it's hard when we open this up to know where to start, to know what to read. And so here's what I want to do. I want to simplify it the best way that we can, all right? This isn't going to be perfect. I'm not saying this is the best way to go about it. I'm just saying, hey, let's maybe try to have a different way that we're viewing it. And so it's helpful for me to think about it this way, right? I'm not reading a book. I'm not just reading a book. What I'm reading is a letter, depending where I'm at, a letter written to a group of people. Or I'm reading pieces of advice by a father wrote down for his son. Or a history book recording things that happened. Or a song written by God to his people. Or songs written by God's people to worship God. Or eyewitness accounts of people that walked with Jesus, hung out with Jesus, and met Jesus, and they recorded what he did. See, those are some of the contexts that sometimes we miss when we open this up. And no wonder when we don't know that context, when we look at this, we're like, what does this say? This is confusing. And so here's some context behind what we're looking at tonight. So if you have your Bibles, we're going to be in 2 Timothy. You can pull it up on your phone. We're also going to throw it up on the screen for you. But 2 Timothy, here's the context, right? This is the most simple context ever, but sometimes we even miss this. It's called 2 Timothy because it was the second letter to a guy named Timothy. Everybody go, ooh. You're welcome, right? We have this guy named Apostle. This guy named Apostle. This guy named Paul, who was an apostle. And what he did is he wrote this letter. He was the mentor and friend of Timothy. And so he's writing him this letter. Here's what Paul writes to him. It says, only Luke is with me. Bring Mark with you when you come, for he will be helpful to me in my ministry. And I sent, I'm not even going to try that name, to Ephesus. And when you come, be sure to bring the coat that I left with Carpus and Troas. Also bring my books and especially my papers. All right. You read that and you probably are thinking to yourself, just like I am, if you don't have context, so? Right? So what? What does that have to do for what I'm going through? And here's the context. The context makes this make sense. Paul left his jacket. He wants Timothy to bring it back. Super simple. But we know this because of the passage that comes from the letter written by Paul. And so let me give you a second example. All right, so here's how we're going to do this. Here's how I think sometimes context mixes things up and messes up how we understand God and how we understand the Bible. So I need some people that think they can dunk. Does anybody think they can dunk? And I mean, if we lower this, you could do a good dunk. All right, I need 3. All right, we'll go Chandler's been asking all day for this. All right, in the back, and then we'll go Cameron over here. Sorry. All right, so here's what I need you to do. So go ahead and grab 2 basketballs back there for me. If I could get somebody just to lower this while they do this real quick, just to hold it. Now, here's what I'm going to say. We just fixed this basketball hoop, so please don't break it. Don't hang on it, all right? Don't hang on it. You can dunk, but don't hang on it. So here's what we're going to do. All right, lower it. That's good. All right, that's good. Is that good? That's fine. All right, take a seat. All right, let's get our dunkers over here. Let's line up. Hurry. We got to move quick. Yeah, lock it in right there. All right. Line up. So here's what we're going to do, those of us that are not dunking. We're going to count them down. So we're going to go 3, 2, 1, dunk. And on dunk, you guys are going to give us your best dunk. Can you guys do that? All right, who's going first? Who do you guys want to go first? Cheer for whoever you want to go first. We might need to lower it a little bit more. Hey, lower it a little bit more. You guys are probably like, what does this have to do with anything? All right, this should be right there. That's good. If they can't dunk on that, they're really white. All right. So, you guys ready? It's low enough. All right. Yeah, it's low enough. Yeah, you're good. All right, line up. All right, you guys got it. What are we doing? 3, 2, 1, dunk. All right, Cameron, you ready? Best dunk. Here we go. Ready? 3, 2, 1, dunk. Oh! Hey! You just messing with us. All right, who's next? You got it? All right, let's count them down. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, dunk. Oh, that was pretty good. That was clean. All right, you ready? We got Cole. All right, here we go. You get dunk with a chair? All right, let's see it, Miss Kelly. Can you? All right, here we go. You ready? Let's count down. 3, 2, 1, dunk. Hey, he got it. All right, last one. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, dunk. Oh! All right, that was pretty good. Here's what I need you guys to do now. I need you to raise it all the way up. All right, now let's see it. We're going to raise it all the way up, and now see it. Yeah, all the way up. Here we go. All right, lock that in. All right, line back up. Yep, you got to try and dunk. All right, here we go. Let's count them down. 3, 2, 1. You're good. Dunk. Hey, that was pretty good. Good hops. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Dunk. Nice. All right, next one. 3, 2, 1. That was nice. Chandler's been waiting his whole life for this. He's actually been training. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, dunk. All right. Hey, give it up for our dunkers. Everybody give it up for them. Go grab a seat. All right, shh. Bring it back in. All right, you're probably wondering, what does that have to do with context? All right, shh. One of the things, so I grew up being an athlete. I love sports and stuff. And something that I saw all the time and that I struggled with is I would write this one little verse on everything. Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And it's really easy when that hoop is down low to be like, Lord, give me the strength to dunk this basketball, right? But when we read that verse, it's really easy if we don't have context to be like, well, if I just pray, I'm going to Space Jam this, right? Like, Lord, give me strength. And we're going to fly, right? We're going to be like Bugs Bunny in the air. And we're going to dunk it, right? But obviously we know that's not true. Like for all of us that were dunking, once you saw it went up to 10 feet, right? You were like, man, dang it. You know, like, can't do it. I can't do it. And here's the thing. With no context, that verse could mean that, man, I could dunk on a 10-foot basketball hoop because Christ gives me strength. Amen? Right? Or we could be like, man, I could pass my math class because I didn't study, but you know what? The Lord is good. He gives me strength, so I'm going to get an A on this because I prayed about it. Or I can go viral on TikTok because you know what? Jesus had 12 followers. You know, like, that was a stupid joke. I'm sorry. That was the worst dad joke. I'm gonna leave now. All right, so anyways, you're welcome. But no context at all. Here's what happens, all right? It sounds like when we read that verse, here's what that sounds like. It sounds like with Jesus, we can live all of our dreams. That he'll give us the strength to live out all of our dreams. But doesn't mean what we think it means. Well, here's some context to help about what that verse is, what's happening in that verse. So Paul writes that verse, Philippians 4:13. He writes this to this church. And what he's writing to them is where he's writing to them from is jail because of his faith. And he's writing them this verse, and he's pretty much thanking them for all the ways that they've been kind to him, all the ways that they've encouraged him. And because of that, he's content. And so really what's happening in this verse is not about God gives me strength to do anything. What's actually happening, if we were to read that again, is, I lost it, hold on. It's pretty much, the Lord is good, God gives me strength, and it will be okay. That's really what it's saying because of the context that is happening. See, here's the thing. Paul was dependent on Jesus. His close relationship with Jesus gave him the power and strength to persevere and to find peace. See, here's the thing about context. Here's why this is so important if you want to understand what it means to be a Christian, to understand what Jesus is saying, all right? Context creates clarity. It makes things clear. So those verses, those stories that, man, you're like, I have no idea what is happening here. There's probably context that we need to find. There's context that we need to chase after and that we need to look for. Now, you might be thinking, Tanner, that's great. That's awesome. But how does this help me be a Christian? Like what do I have to believe? What do I have to do? What do I have to do to understand all of this better? Like where do I even start? And that's a great question. So let me simplify it for us, and we're almost done here. But in order for us to be a Christian and to understand the Bible, to understand this context, here's where I want us to start, all right? We need to believe this, that what we're reading, we're real people who walked with a real God. Let me say that again. There were real people who walked with a real God. Because it is so easy, if we're not careful, to view this as stories. It's just another Disney movie. It's something that we learned in kids' church, right? And forget, man, these were people that walked with God. These are people that recorded what happened in their life. And we'll dive into that more in these next few weeks and go a little bit deeper, but that's where we need to start. See, there's this book written by this lady. Her name's Karen Armstrong, and her background is she's kind of hurt by the church and grew up a little bit differently. And so she has this really unique perspective when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to church, and when it comes to this thing called faith. Here's what she said. We learned about God about the same time that we learned about Santa. And while our understanding of Santa evolved and matured, our beliefs about God stayed childish. That many of us, maybe we heard about Jesus, maybe we experienced it at kids' church, but our faith didn't grow up with us. It just stayed there. Let me put it this way, all right? And this might be a little harsh, and so I want to say this. A safe place, right? But safe doesn't always mean comfortable. What if for many of us, the reason that we're struggling and that we're doubting is because our faith has stayed childish? They're just stories to us. That we haven't put the work in, made the effort to know him more. That it's just something that happens during the week. See, I know from my experience, if you do put in the work, even if you're doubting it, but if you're looking for Jesus, over time, he will reveal himself. It's like earlier with this dunk contest, right? All right, so in this dunk contest, if we keep the rim low, it's easy to dunk, right? But the moment that I raise this up to 10 feet, I realize that all 5'5.5" of me, right, realizes really quickly, I can't do that. I need a trampoline or something. I need some help. Like, I can't dunk. Like, I come back to reality. And I think the reality for us is, here's what we need to do. Most of our faith is lowered right now. And in order for us to understand God better, we have to raise the rim. We have to raise the rim. We need to raise the rim in order to understand a real God. In other words, we need to put the work in. And God will show us who he is. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to end with this. This is different for all of us. All right? Depending on where you're at with your walk with God or your faith journey and stuff, you might be in a different space, a different step. The rim might be lower for you, and you just need to raise it up a little bit, right, to work on it. Maybe for some of us, we're ready to make that jump. We're like, you know what, it's been up here. I just got to make the effort. I just got to train for this. You know, I got to take this seriously. And so I don't know where you're at with that. But here's my challenge for us. As we're about to go into worship together, but we're about to finish out with small groups and then hang out the rest of the night. What is the thing in your life that you need to raise the rim on? That maybe it has just stayed at the same level your whole life. Your faith, all of that. And what would it look like if you take the chance to raise this up? And that might be scary because you're like, I can't do that. But guess what? You don't have to do it on your own. You have amazing leaders there in this place, but also God is with you with that too. So what would it look like today, tonight? Wherever you're at, we just take that first step to move on, to be curious maybe for some of us, maybe to grow in that walk with him. Now, over the next few weeks, we're going to look at this a little bit deeper. We're going to look at who Jesus is, what the Bible means, all of that. And so I want to encourage you, man, invite your friends, bring your questions, because this stuff that's happening in this room, us jumping up and down and eating weird Oreos and like doing dunk contests, but also being real and talking about our life, maybe laughing together, crying together, man, that stuff matters. That stuff matters. So what's the step that you need to take so that stuff becomes regular in your life and not just something that was a phase?